Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romans podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it. Well, it truly feels like summer now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's gotten really warm now. We're hitting the mid 30s.
It's funny because I always think, oh, I can't wait till summer. And then summer comes and it's so hot. I can't even go outside because I don't do well with heat. And it feels like you're in an oven. I always forget how hot it gets till summer actually arrives. And it's like, surprise.
Well, my take on that. I was built for hot weather, so I enjoy it when it hits the mid 30s. Granted, it can get really hot, so you got to keep yourself nice and cool.
So if you're thinking of coming to Italy in the summer, keep that in mind. It's going to be really hot. So what kind of destinations do you think are the best for summer? I would say beaches, right? Historical cities, great food. So what destination are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Puglia. Puglia is actually located on the heel of the Italian boot. It's bordered by the Adriatic Sea, and it's home to probably the nicest beaches in southern Italy.
Puglia is also a region that we fell in love with when we visited the first time a few years ago. And I don't think as many people go to Puglia as they go to different parts of Italy. So again, Puglia, I thought would be a great conversation for today because it is a great region to explore. And if you're looking for a summer destination, it's also the perfect place because, as you said, it has so many beaches and it's pretty much surrounded by, the coastline. So there's lots of beaches to choose from.
Yeah, so Puglia is very flat. It's not mountainous or hilly like northern parts of Italy. So you'll find that when you do drive through Puglia, you do see the odd hill and valley, but it's nothing like the northern portion of Italy.
I would say it's even very different from, when we drove down through Calabria, we went to Sicily. Even where we live, it's very mountainous and Puglia is very flat. So when you look at it comparing to the other parts of Italy, it feels very different. It's also filled with olive groves. It's the olive trees spreading around you. And I think that's what Puglia looks like to me. It's like a lot of olive groves and lots of beaches.
Yeah, like you mentioned, lots of olive groves, but it's also a region very rich with various foods. And of course, one of my favorite wines actually are grown in the area, which is the Nero di Troia.
When we went to Puglia, we stayed at an olive grove. They used to make their own olive oil back in the day, and they don't do it on site anymore, but still, the property was surrounded by like thousands of olive trees. And it was such a cool experience to stay like in the middle of this old historic home with all these olive groves. And it was such a beautiful experience.
The agriturismo we stayed at was in Lecce, which was actually really nice. The location actually contained a lot of the old equipment that they used to make olive oil back in the day. Back in the Roman times, they were well known to produce this oil, and it was actually mainly used for lighting. So, torches and such. So they actually exported a lot of it all over Europe, and it was actually a huge hub for that.
It's interesting looking back at it now to think that this expensive olive oil was just used basically for like lighting and not really for like consumption as we do today, because a lot of the oil that we even here in Italy comes from Puglia, right? Puglia is well known for its oil. So it's a bit ironic that, back in those days, they just used it to light.
Yeah, it was actually preferred for lighting because the fact that it burned very, very cleanly, I guess, but didn't produce a lot of smoke or odor. So it was the preferred way to have any sort of lighting back in those days.
Let's talk about how to get to Puglia, because it sort of sticks out from the rest of Italy, right? Physically, because it's not really connected by all sides. It's just sort of the top. The top is connected to the rest of the boot. There are a couple of airports. The main one is in Bari and the other one is in Brindisi. So both cities are sort of north of the top of the hill, not so much the south. So if you were going to Puglia, you probably want to fly into those places because, again, there are no more airports if you go further south unless... Well, no, I guess there's no more airports when you go further south. So another way to get there would be to take a ferry, or you can take the train, or do what we did. We drove. So Puglia itself might not seem like it's that small, but actually from the top of the region to, let's say, somewhere in the bottom could take you about 3 hours to drive through. So again, it's not something that I would say, oh, stay in the top of Puglia. Let's say you stay near Bari and then you just pop over to Gallipoli or you pop somewhere else down for the day because it will take you quite a while to drive down. So I would say you can probably plan to stay sort of more center, and then that gives you a way to explore more of the region because to get from one side to the other is not that much because it's thin, it's just long. That's what makes it a bit more difficult to get around.
Yeah, travel to Puglia is actually fairly easy. It took us about 3 hours to get there using the toll roads. So it's also a very scenic drive, right? So very enjoyable if you like to drive.
So now let's talk about what makes Puglia so special because it's a bit different than the rest of Italy, right? I know I keep saying this. Once you live here and you explore more of it, you do realize that each region has so many things about it that make it unique. So Puglia used to be part of the Greek settlements. So there's parts of Puglia sometimes where you walk around and you sort of get that vibe of the Greek islands. So you do have the whitewash houses with like the blue trim, and you do feel that Greek vibe that I don't think you feel in other parts of Italy. Even where we live, this used to be part of the Magna Graecia as well, but you don't get that same kind of feel. When you go to Puglia, you do feel it. If you go to towns like Alberobello and Ostuni, you do get that Greek island vibe, which is very different from, let's say, other parts of Italy. Right?
Yeah, one of my favorite cities actually in Puglia is Lecce, which is very scenic, very historic, and it's actually considered the Florence of the South. If you ever do visit, it does remind you of Florence quite a bit.
Yeah, and I do have a blend of the Baroque architecture, which is really iconic of Italy. And then you have the Roman amphitheater, which is sort of unexpected in the middle of the city, but you do get that mix. So you have a place like Lecce, which is beautiful. And I don't think many people think of towns like that in Puglia because you think, oh, it's all olive trees. But no, they do have some fantastic Baroque cities. And another thing, I guess, that's more unique to Puglia is the Trulli houses, which you'll find in Alberobello. So they have those sort of cylindrical homes with a pointy roof. And they're very unique to Puglia. They don't have them other places. So again, it's very circular. They have a little pointy top and they don't really have a lot of windows. They might have some and they don't have really rooms inside. So you have a Trullo, which is be one room, and then you might have some of them connected to each other, which, kind of expand. But again, this is very unique to Puglia.
Yeah, we visited quite a few of those Trulli houses in Alberobello. They are pretty interesting, much smaller than they look from the outside, but we did see some that had even pools in the back, which was pretty cool. But it did remind me of Greece with the whitewashed walls and all that, so I thought it was pretty cool.
And I think the reason that they had them built like that, you were taxed on your permanent housing. The way they were built was fairly easy for them to be dismantled and moved. You were like, well, I'm not really living here because I'm packing up my house and I'm moving it over. So you kind of got away with not paying for your, I guess, property taxes because your property wasn't permanent. You were able to move it. And that's what made them so popular over time. They eventually, expanded them. So again, you would have more than one Trullo, and then some of them became bigger, and some of them included other ones in there. And if you are going to Puglia and you want to really splurge, they have a lot of these Trulli that were renovated, and now they're really nice hotels and come with a pool, and they're sort of more in the countryside. And it's really quite an experience if you want that, a taste of what that life in a Trullo was, but of course with an upscale take on it.
Yeah, and last summer we did end up going to Trani, which is, a seaport town with lots of beaches, and there are, various types of beaches, rocky, sandy, and, they also had a really, really cool foodie scene. So if you're interested in foods, that's a great stop if you plan on staying at a beach resort for the summer.
That was a very touristy place, but it was very geared towards summer tourists. It was very beach focused. I'm not sure how it would be off season, but they had a beautiful promenade and you can just walk along the water. They had restaurants and clubs and bike paths. And that was actually quite nice. I enjoyed that stay. And it wasn't as far south because it was, like you said, it was close to Bari, which makes it the northern part of Puglia, which was very different from when we were in, let's say, Gallipoli, which is further south. And Gallipoli was also a very nice beachy town. You remember that was a very cool vibe too. It was more like party oriented, and they had a lot of like those really narrow streets and again those white houses, and that vibe there was actually quite cool too.
Yeah, you definitely had the Roman influences, especially in the town center. Lots of cathedrals, churches. So and there was also some concerts, I think, going on at the time. So it is quite happening in the summer.
There are a lot of towns that you might want to visit. So we've mentioned Lecce, we've mentioned Alberobello, Ostuni, but there's also Pogliano Mare. So again, you see a lot of the pictures of that on Instagram or different places. There's a beautiful cliff and of course beaches, and people always take pictures in Pogliano Mare, which again is beautiful. But you don't have to go to a place like this to enjoy the beaches. Like the whole coast pretty much all the way around is filled with beaches. So we've gone to some that were more of I guess they call them free beaches, which basically means you can bring your own chair and umbrella. We also had some that were, you can rent, like a umbrella and chairs. And they were all very nice. They were mostly sandy, except for the ones that we were last summer. So again, you have sandy beaches. The water's pretty warm. Again, it's further south, so it's warmer longer, and winter is not very harsh there. It's very mild. If you're looking for summer vacation, I think Puglia delivers because you get a lot of the beaches, you get a lot of outdoor activities, but you also get that cultural cities with lots of cool architecture. Even the town we stayed at, Lecce, that one had a historic center. It had like the cool architecture. And there's just so many little towns like that all around Puglia, and everyone has, something to offer. So you might have a little interesting church. You might have some, like a farm or another sort of big property, which, is quite nice to explore. Again, it's very different looking than what you get, let's say, in North Italy or even Central Italy. I think it's worth exploring if you want just a bit of a different taste of Italy.
We also had a quick stopover in Bari, which is the capital of the region. And actually, it's a fairly large city. I think it's around, over 300,000 people live in Bari. And it's very, well, I didn't find it too touristy. It was considered the economic center of the mainland southern Italy. So it's definitely worth a stopover to visit.
I would say Bari was a bit of a surprise because, I don't know, I didn't know too much about Bari. People kind of say, wow, it's like a big city, it's sort of commercial, and you don't really get too much info. So I thought, okay, it'll be just like a big city. But I remember when we got there, it had a lot of character. It was pretty, like the architecture was nice. You had a lot of like coffee shops and bars, and people seemed nice, the ones we've talked to. And it was a lot. Well, I mean, it was a bigger city. It wasn't a tiny one, but it was a bit of a nice surprise. I love the architecture. I love the vibe. I'd love to go back to Bari. I think if you were planning on going to Puglia, I would suggest spending some time in Bari and doing those little, day trips to other areas. And then you might want to move down further south. So stay in places like Lecce, or even where we went to like Gallipoli, which is a bit, I would say, almost center of Puglia. So then from Gallipoli, where we stayed, it was very close to going across, going further south, or you can go down. And I think that's a good central location for exploring Puglia, because you don't want to be driving, every day somewhere else. This way you're able to stay in one spot and then do a little bit of day trips and enjoy everything around you.
Yeah, and speaking of Bari, the Barese accent is actually very difficult to understand. So if you do hear the locals speaking and you're used to normal Italian, you will not make heads or tails of it. So it is definitely something you will be surprised by, because even as someone who speaks Italian quite well, I could not understand the word that they actually speak of.
That's actually funny that you mentioned that, because when we were in Trani, they were speaking Barese too. And we were like, what the hell are they saying? But it's very hard to explain. As somebody who doesn't speak Italian well, I would say it almost sounds like a made-up language, because you get a lot of sounds from Italian, but also kind of from like more like Arabic languages. But you also kind of get maybe like Portuguese sounding sounds. So it's very confusing. Like, it's not a smooth accent. I think it's very sort of, I don't know if harsh is the right word, but it's very confusing. And if you ever want to hear what Barese sounds like, there is TikTok Barese. And I'm sure if you type it into like Instagram or TikTok, you will find people doing like comparison videos. So they'll say, something in like regular Italian, then they'll say the same thing in the Barese accent. And I'm telling you, it sounds like a totally different language that if you don't speak Italian, it can sound made up because it's just so difficult.
Yeah, agreed. It is very difficult to understand, and supposedly it's supposed to be a variant of the Naples dialect, but I don't see it because it's totally different. I catch some words here and there, but I think it's mostly influenced, like you said, some old French or some even Greek of some sort. Because it's definitely a different dialect, and it's probably the most difficult of all of Italy.
Remember, there's another dialect you were telling me about that's specific to Puglia. There's an area where they speak almost like a Greek Italian.
Yeah, there is I think a town in southern Puglia that specifically speaks a type of Greek language, and it's, like I said, it's very difficult to understand, even more so than normal Barese. So you do catch some of the odd Italian words when they speak it, but it's mainly Greek.
Yeah, which again speaks to roots in the Greek culture, which again is very interesting, because I don't think they would have that kind of language influence in other parts of Italy in a different dialects. Not that I've heard of. Have you heard anything?
No, definitely not. I think this is the only one that I'm aware of. I think it's called Greco, I think is the dialect. The remnants of Puglia's, I guess, Magna Graecia past, right? Where they had Greek colonies in the area. So they're trying to keep it alive, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to hear.
So then, speaking of the history of Puglia, I think it's also very interesting because we've already mentioned that it was, part of the Greek settlements, but it was also part of the Romans, of course. And then you had the Byzantine influences, the Normans, and again, it was part of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. So again, the Bourbon kings were ruling there. But I think what's interesting is that Puglia actually played a role in the unification of Italy. So when Garibaldi was going across and trying to rally people to join the unified country, I think after he went through Naples, he went down for the south, and people there like really welcomed him and they wanted to join. He was very successful in that. By Puglia joining in, he was quite significant in other regions joining as well. So they played a role in that. But another fun fact, well, I don't know if it's fun, but During World War II, Puglia also played a key role. So when they did the storming in Sicily, the Allies made their way into mainland Italy and they went through Puglia. So I think Bari was originally bombed very heavily by the German forces. And I don't know if you knew this. I didn't know either. I just kind of looked it up before we started recording. But apparently the Germans bombed Bari in the port, and there was a ship that had a shipment of the mustard gas. So unfortunately, that was a disaster because it killed a lot of people when they dropped the bombs on it, which, again, not a fun fact, just an interesting part of the role Puglia played in both those events, the unification and the World War II.
No, I didn't know that. But speaking of which, did you know that there's tarantulas in Puglia?
What?
Yeah, actually, it's a well-known fact that, that area is home to the tarantula. Yeah, there's actually a dance that was called, or is called, the tarantella. It originates from the city or the town Taranto. And back in the day, it was actually done for people that were bitten or stung by the tarantula. It carried out these weird dances kind of to, I guess, bring these people back from, the sting. And yeah, it's one of the oddities down from Puglia.
That just sounds so weird to me. Like, how was a dance going to help a spider bite? It just seems very weird, but I'm sure that was just an excuse to maybe just have a party, because I don't really think that dancing will heal you of a spider. I mean, are tarantulas even like deadlier, or is it different types of tarantulas?
Well, I don't think they're deadly, but they can sting, I guess, or bite you. And I guess they can give out some sort of venom. I guess people would feel ill from it, and then this dance would supposedly help you out.
I'm sure it did. So is the Tarali also named after this?
You know what? No, I don't think so. And speaking of which, I think we can probably segue into the culinary delights of Puglia.
So why don't you explain what a Tarali is then?
Yeah, so tarali is actually a small ring. It's made of a crispy dough, and usually with olive oil. It's made with olive oil. You'll find it all over Puglia. It's actually a very popular snack, and you'll find it in various flavors. I think we were in Alberobello, we saw like 10 different flavors of the snack. But the most common one is made with olive oil, right? There are ones like, spicy ones with hot peppers. I think even rapini type of tarali. There's various kinds, and they're super addictive, very tasty. And you'll see it actually, if you go on Instagram, you'll actually see some actors talk about the snack. It's that addictive, and they're wondering, what is this snack? Why is it so addictive? And they just constantly eat them. It's hard to not finish the package.
But you know what? I think they taste differently in Puglia, because we can buy them in a grocery store here. And even though it says they are from Puglia, they don't taste the same.
Yeah, it's totally different because, if the flavors is different, especially when they're fresh. They're not as dry. So I think that's why they do taste different there.
And tarali is the kind of side dish. Maybe when you go and order some drinks, they bring you like a little trays of little appies. Sometimes many places, not just Puglia, but they'll bring you like some tarali. And again, those are very popular, like you said. So they come from Puglia. So if you are there, you should definitely try them, because they are, like we said, they taste better. And they come in kind of different sizes, right? There's like little smaller ones. There's sort of the bigger ones. I don't think they come in like big size, right? Or do they?
No, usually they're small. I think the bigger ones are considered, I think they're called friselle or frise. They look like almost like a cut bagel that's really dry. And usually they'll moisten it by adding olive oil or making a bruschetta out of it. So that's, I guess, a variation of it. But yeah, tarali is totally different. I prefer those.
So they also have their own version of focaccia, which is like bread, kind of soft, with tomatoes and olives.
Yeah, it's usually cherry tomatoes on almost like a pizza dough, right? And I think they put some olive oil on it, and maybe some dried spices, which is really good.
So the pasta that comes from Puglia is also very distinct. I think they have a couple different ones, but one that is sort of the most prominent is the orecchiette, which is the ear. And they're sort of small discs, although they come in bigger sizes, but they're like little round discs. They're popular with different side dishes. So you don't have to just have, pasta with tomato sauce. You probably have it more with like turnips or, like you said, the rapini or something else mixed with it, with garlic, which is slightly different than you would get in other parts of Italy.
Yeah, that dish is really popular. We get it with broccoli rabe. So essentially, we refer to broccoli rabe as in the US or Canada, it's referred to as rapini. But here it's broccoli rabe. So what they do is it's boiled, the rabe, and they will, you'll saute it with some olive oil and garlic and just toss it with the orecchiette. And it's super popular here.
So another thing that I really enjoyed when we were in Puglia is those little sandwiches. It's called puccia. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's sort of like a flatbread and it's filled with different things. You can get different fillings. I had one with tuna and avocado, and you can get like a just plain tomato and cheese and lettuce.
Mine was, I guess, veggie based. Some grilled vegetables in it, and kind of I think like a sweet compote of some sort in it. So yeah, it comes in various types. So you can have it with meat, you can have it with cured meats, you can have it with I think tuna and salmon. So it's actually really tasty.
And I mean, they're fairly accessible at different places. If you're just looking for something to grab, you can just get a sandwich and it's easy, take it with you. You don't have to spend too much time. And it's good to have, especially when it's really hot, you don't want something heavy or something hot. A puccia is a perfect answer to that problem.
One of the other foods that I really enjoy is panzerotti. If you're not aware, and I'm sure a lot of North Americans are aware of it, but if you aren't, it is a deep fried pockets of dough, basically. And it's usually filled with tomato and mozzarella. It's almost like a pizza that's been folded over and fried. There's also variations where you can get prosciutto and mozzarella also, which is really popular. Super hot, so be careful when you bite into it. But yeah, those are fantastic snacks. I always try and get one when I'm there.
So now we can't talk about Puglia without talking about your favorite wine.
Yeah, definitely. My favorite wine is not a very well-known variety of wine in Puglia. It's the Nero di Troia, and it's easily my favorite table wine. It's usually the only wine I really drink most often. It's similar to, I guess, the Spanish Tempranillo, which is very very almost fruity, a little bit of tan. It's not very tannic, but it gives you that mouthful of great flavor. So it is one of my favorite wines, or my favorite wine of all time.
And it's very affordable here, isn't it, comparing to Canada?
Oh, definitely. Here you can get it for about €3, €3.50. In Canada, you have to order it. And most times you have to get a case of it. And it's usually around $20. So yeah, it's a big difference in price, but I think it's one of the best wines of Southern Italy.
So is Puglia mostly known for like red wines?
Yes, because of the temperature. Obviously, it's very hot, so it's very, very hot and dry. So that variety of grape is popular, and that's where you get the sweetness from the wine when it's produced. So. Very similar to, I guess, the Valpolicella also, if you drink northern wines, but with a little bit more kick. So usually a higher alcohol content.
What are some of the types of wine that people should look for if they're looking at wine from Puglia other than Nero di Troia?
Yeah, the other well-known wine actually is Negramaro, which is a very popular wine in the south, specifically in Puglia. It's a variety of the red. It's similar to Nero di Troia, but not as sweet and a little more tannic. So it's really really good for aging, and it's a little bit lower in alcohol content usually. Yeah, another wine that's really popular of the red variety is the Primitivo di Manduria. So if you like a wine that's more dry or much drier than the other two I mentioned, this is actually probably your best bet. So if, and it's a little bit less alcohol content, usually 12 or 13%, but it's also a very good wine.
So let's talk about the best time to go to Puglia. Would you say it's the summer?
Well, you know me, I enjoy the heat. So if you do like very high temperatures, the summer is the best time to go. If you want to enjoy the cities, touring the cities like Lecce and Bari, I would probably go for spring or fall because the weather is a little bit more milder. And of course, you're going to get fewer tourists at that time.
We went in the summertime before. We went a couple of times, but we also went in January when we went to Gravina in Puglia, which is very similar to Matera. Matera is the city of caves, which is in a different region. But we went to Gravina and Puglia. We stayed there. And that was January and the weather was lovely. So if you go further down south, I assume it's going to be even nicer. So like I always say, if you want to come to Italy between January and April, Puglia is also a great place to go. Now, if you're allergic to pollen, I might say maybe avoid that time. I am allergic to pollen, and I discovered that I'm also allergic to the pollen from olive trees because apparently it's very harsh and it's really irritating. So yeah, if you're allergic to pollen, I would say probably skip the spring months, but January to like March, you should be okay because they don't start blooming. But I would avoid like April, May, because that's when they're blooming. And trust me, it can get very, very uncomfortable. I discovered this year because we have olive trees across the street, and when they were in bloom, oh, it was deadly.
So if you're visiting Puglia and want to visit the lesser known towns, granted, Puglia isn't a very popular destination. You'll see that, many of the towns are fairly lesser known, but my preference would be probably to stay in Bari because you're in a bigger city, lots to do, and it's a good home base to visit other parts of Puglia.
I would agree. Although I don't know if it's maybe not popular. I think it's not as well known because we did come across a lot of foreign tourists that were not Italian, but they were from other parts of Europe. And we didn't really see that many North American tourists in Puglia, but I think that's kind of changing now. I would agree with you, though. I think Bari is a good starting point because, again, it's an airport. So you can fly into Bari or start there, and then you can either go north to the end of the region, or you can go further down south. Like we said, we stayed in Gallipoli, which is fairly low, almost at the end of the tip of the hill. You have Lecce, and then you have other little towns there. And you have the bigger towns like Brindisi, Taranto, and they're well connected, so you can drive across. And I would say if you're coming to Puglia, I would say do a road trip, fly into Bari, rent a car, and you can drive down one end. Like, so you go to Puglia Mare, Monopoli, Ostuni, Brindisi, you can hit Lecce, then you can have Otranto and then Gallipoli, and then you can make your way back up to Taranto. And then if you want to stop in Matera, it's just across the border, and then Gravina and Puglia, make your way back. I think that'll be a good road trip if you are going to Puglia and you're looking for something different to do.
Yeah, so that's our recommendations for Puglia. It is definitely worth visiting, and you've heard some of our personal preferences. Definitely several spots that you can have your home base and visit different areas of Puglia.
Did you have any favorite memories of any of the stops that we had when we were in Puglia?
Yeah, my preference, like I said, Bari was actually very memorable. I enjoyed our stay in Bari. I wish we spent a little more time there, but a few days would be plenty in Bari.
I think we should definitely go back to Bari. One of my favorite experiences was staying at that olive farm, olive grove. That was just such a unique experience, and I really found it to be so relaxing. And again, it was just on the outskirts of the small town of Lecce. And then it was about 6 kilometers to Gallipoli. So again, it was very close to get to the beach. The town was great. The restaurants, they were pretty good. And the farm I don't know if it's a farm, the olive grove that we stayed on, they even gave us some olive oil that they made on site, and it was just so lovely. I had such a great memory of that place, and that was my favorite sort of memory of Puglia.
I enjoyed my outing in Puglia quite a bit, visiting the various cities, towns. And I think they're all memorable, so you can't go wrong whichever place you end up choosing.
If you're thinking of a summer destination in Italy, or if you're looking at Italy in a different season, I would say Puglia is a good place to explore because, again, it's a different type of Italy that you're not going to find somewhere else. There's a bit of a different vibe in Puglia, different landscapes, different history, different sort of architecture. And I think it's a very interesting part of Italy. And again, very different part of Italy that you get, if you only go to like Rome or Florence or Venice and Tuscany. So I definitely recommend Puglia for your next Italian escape. And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review on whatever you're listening right now. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.